Hey, what's up, guys? It's Todd from zeotag.com, and today we're talking about the business of podcasting with Joe Fier from the Hustle and Flowchart podcast, which I highly recommend checking out. We talk about his journey through podcasting and how he had 3 different shows, what kind of walls and hurdles he hit, and how they overcame them to now have their very consistent show running for over 3 years now, how they turned that podcast into the real hub of their overall business, how they monetize the podcast, how they use the podcast to build an audience of customers, how they turn their customers into an audience who loves them, all that kind of great stuff. Joe was also kind enough to give out a free copy of their traffic playbook. If you go to hustleandflowchart.com/zeotag, you can get a free copy there. And if you have a podcast, that will show you how you can really drive traffic and build an audience around your show. And if you do have a podcast, you also want to go and sign up for your free ZeoTag account so that you can get your episodes auto-transcribed, deep tagged, so you can skim and share anything from within your episode, and an actionable table of contents, which makes every talking point available for your viewers to watch, click on, and reference back to. So zeotag.com to get your free account for that stuff. Hustleandflowchart.com/zeotag to get your free traffic playbook from Joe. And watch this full episode to learn all the tips and tricks they've learned from years of podcasting, how they turn it into a business, how they make money, and how they repurpose their podcast episodes to run their entire business through just a small team of a few people. All right, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Joe. All right, Mr. Joe Fier, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate your time. You guys are running one of, if not the best business podcast out right now. I don't know where it is in terms of rankings, but certainly in terms of quality content and guests and information, you guys are really at the top. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us, and really excited to hear more about, how you guys operate the podcast and the business. So to get started, why don't you just give a little background, on who you are and how you got started and what your journey in the podcasting business has been so far.
For sure, yeah, and thanks for having me here, Todd. And I love chatting about this stuff. And I know you said it's weird talking because you usually hear my voice on 2x speed.
Yeah.
so yeah, it's podcasting, man. It's interesting. So I guess my story will go all the way back to about, I guess we'll say like 10, 15 years ago, right around that time frame is where Matt and I were starting things out. It's been about 12 years officially doing like online marketing type things. And, around that point is when him and I were just tinkering around on, like outside of work hours. We worked in his family's company business actually for a little bit together. And that's what kicked us off into blogging originally and making some money with AdSense. We're, making a whopping, $100 a month. And we're like, yes, this is the way.
But that's what it was back then, right? I mean, that's how people you got that taste that, the blood was in the water and it was like, oh my God, there's a life outside of this office building or whatever, right?
That's it. Yeah, man. And it was just enough of like a little sparkle of like hope. We're like, all right, what if we actually dedicated more time and, consistency to this? And then, it got us on like a learning journey where we're like, okay, cool. Well, that worked. And, we did these text link ads, which I think are not even allowed anymore. but we were getting paid pretty well on those. It was like, each one's like $50 a month. So those started stacking. So I think we saw the power of just stacking monetization into content. Yeah. And then we started just exploring like, how do we bring more people together? And we did a lot of guerrilla type marketing back there, like forum marketing, doing a lot of the very personalized stuff before we knew how to drive traffic. So that really got the wheel spinning, man. And ever since then, Matt and I we've been partners, but then we like weren't partners. And then, so it's been like back and forth, but we've always had our backs. We've been like, bros that we've never actually had. It's kind of cool. Yeah. We just experiment like crazy. And now that's led us to this point. And we just like to share it all our experiences.
So 12 years in the online marketing game, when did you guys start? Because I know you've had a couple podcasts since the beginning, right? So like how did you get started that first time? Like what sparked it and what were the hurdles and walls you hit that kind of sent you on a pivot?
For sure, man. Good question. Yeah. So I think Matt and I have had 3 shows technically together, and our longest and current show is the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. Yep. Prior to that, I think there was one called Evergreen Wisdom and one online business podcast or online income podcast. Very basic. Yeah. But the reason so I think the first one was actually way back in like 2010 or 2011.
Wow. That's like really early on in the game.
Man, I'm like, I always kick myself if I wish we stuck with it, man. Yeah. But it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, so those things, like the reason we got into it is we're like, hey, podcast. And what Matt and I have always been, we always love to just chat everything marketing and come up with crazy ideas and, just kind of connect the dots. And we always like to share what we learn. So that was like the catalyst of having a show in the first place, a podcast. Yeah.
And when did you recognize that podcasting could be associated or work in tandem with your business, as opposed to like, it's one thing to have a friend that you love chopping it up with, right? But then how did that become part of the business?
Yeah, good call. And see, that is a key reason why it didn't work out the first time around, or even the second time around. They were more like ideas, and they were siloed ideas that didn't really have connections to the rest of our business. So that was part of the failure of those. And then also we didn't do a lot of the systems approach that we do now really well. Like we can get into that later, but like batch recording and things like that. But now, I would say it wasn't until the Hustle and Flowchart show that we started really connecting everything together. Mm-hmm. And even then, I think it took maybe like a few months to kind of get going. And we're like, okay, well, this thing is going to live in the same ecosystem as, our written content, our email list, and our social media following. Yeah. But it was tough because, we're Evergreen Profits is our company, but then Hustle and Flowchart is this name that's not the same.
Right.
But now we're realizing, oh, wow, we're actually more known for the Hustle and Flowchart guys rather than Evergreen Profits. Right. So we're doing a full rebrand. The podcast literally is taking over. Which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is that where you have your primary audience is in podcast subscribers?
Yeah, I would say the primary, at least, I guess if we define primary, that's where the attention is. Like that's like where our trust building, our discovery, a lot of people find us. Indoctrination happens on the podcast, basically. Yeah.
That's I think that's a question I have because to me, where I see podcasting, at least when you start a podcast, if you think that if you're going to just publish podcasts and all of a sudden people find you, right? Like that's not really how it works, and it's not that easy. And so I like to look at a podcast, at least in the beginning, as that's the indoctrination and engagement stage. Like you have attention somewhere else, or you're getting an initial audience in one place, and then you can move them. And that once you get in their earbuds, now you're really building a close relationship with someone. So, how do you guys kind of use the podcast for that, getting that initial attention versus, building the relationship with the audience?
Yeah. So it's really our personalities. So we connect. We have this kind of frame of reference basically is like anyone who's listening to us for an extended period of time are going to get to know us kind of like a friend of ours. Like all we see is our podcast listeners, at least the ones that stick around and hang out. It's like us at a party. We're just chatting with our buddies, and I think it eases the pressure of like, oh, we got to have everybody. We got to have the biggest numbers. It's like, no, well, really we do, but also we really want a good connection with the audience, and we want to take them down the line to join our email list, join our newsletter, join our Facebook group, things like that. Yeah. Because that's really where the magic's happening. Yeah.
All of things which I highly recommend all of our viewers jump in and subscribe to and join too. And
thank you.
And so before we get too far away from the initial topic of like podcasting as a business, and then you mentioned it plays in with all these other things. How are you guys making money out of the podcast, or where does it play in the money making thing? And I know you guys have kind of changed a couple things along the way too. So what are the lessons that led you to where you are?
Yeah, I would say the core, I'll just name it as like a high level, is affiliate marketing is the bulk of our income and has been for the last 4 years or so. And so that's probably about 70% and ideally even more, because we diversify in a smart way. So it's not like one product and it's not 100 products, but we're like typically like 10 products on rotation, and they're churning sales almost daily on most of them, which is really cool. We do have our physical newsletter, so the EGP letter. We're just calling it kind of Evergreen Profits now, so that name is going to be applied to that membership. So that's on the back end of the show, the podcast, and that's a $15 a month subscription. Super low barrier. That's like the first thing people usually jump into. And, that gives them a physical, actually just got it in the mail this morning, a physical newsletter that arrives to their house or office, but then also gives them a whole membership area to get extra training from people that have been on our show or our other buddies, like marketing training. And then also all the backlogs of issues and notes from our episodes. So that's how we like to monetize. But then on top of that, you got to think like all we're doing is building a platform where now, we can monetize the podcast through sponsorships. We do that occasionally. And we have the newsletter. So that's a recurring MRR right there for us. We have about 500 people subscribe to that.
And that's relatively new, right? Or is it relatively new?
Right. It's been going for just over, it got restarted. So technically, I think we're 23 issues in. So it's been, but the version 2 is, I think it's just over a year now. Is kind of where it's,
Man, time flies, I can tell you.
I know. It does.
Crazy.
But what's cool, and this is our thinking behind everything when we monetize, is we're trying to extend the platform. So like podcasts can be monetized in many ways. And the newsletter subscription, but also you could sell affiliate products, your own offers in there. So we'll sell things like that basically inside there. And,
so
occasionally our own offers.
And how do you decide, like, if it's like you mentioned the podcast being sponsored, doing like a true paid for sponsorship versus promoting one of your affiliate links or one of your own products? Like, how do you guys determine that for each episode?
Good call. So we typically don't do affiliate promotions on the podcast itself. We did for a little bit. So that's how we started with the whole sponsorship thing. We called them.
I signed up for Gen M through your link. So I mean, that's
There you go. Thank you. So there you go. So that was actually, I think, the only mock sponsorship that we've done on the podcast. We experimented on the main show, and we have a second like repurposed podcast. It's like a shorts version. And I think it's still sponsored on there. Sponsored. But to answer your question too, is we have paid sponsorships like Hrefs has been a sponsor for a long time. LinkedIn is a new one that we just signed up with.
They seem to be really getting into the podcast sponsorships.
They are, and and the way we do that is we're not doing the CPM sponsorship route, which a lot of podcasters think they have to, which is only going to pay you like $25 per 1,000 downloads per episode. So that's like, you got to make some, you got to have an audience make kind of money. So we do the flat fee approach.
That's cool. I like that. And when you get into the CPM stuff, then all of a sudden you're also getting compared to like the CPMs of Facebook ads, right? And like that's hard to compete with. So, I know when we have like some niche clients in, where they want to advertise in the accounting industry, and like those accounting specific websites want to charge X amount for their banner ads, and I'm like, what? Are you crazy? Like, I'm not paying that. That's nuts. Like, we'll just run Facebook ads. So I think that's smart. And plus I think, a lot of podcasters starting out, like 1,000 downloads an episode is a lot of downloads. So to know that
it takes work.
So, doing the flat thing, I think is really cool. Really good idea. And mentioned before about like building an audience that's like hanging out and having a good time. And something that you guys started doing or started referencing more is these intros in the beginning of the episodes have gotten a lot longer and a lot more kind of bantery, I think in a good way, but that hasn't been all the feedback. So can you talk about like your decision to extend your intros and what that's meant to the podcast?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because that's a newer thing. We were just more polling our audience and seeing like, what's your feedback on these? Because our intros we do after we record, and typically the podcast interviews it's the focus is on the guest. We're not, but we also have a good conversation. It's not like interview drilling with them with questions. But in the intro, we always have our takeaways. Like we have our own thoughts about what we just discussed, and what we like to do is say our thoughts, not give away what's in the actual episode, but then relate to like how we're going to apply this in our business, or maybe some things we're already doing in our company right now. And our intros maybe get to about 10 minutes on average or so, but so in terms of the responses we got, I think like really 1 or 2 people out of literally hundreds of responses we've received have said like, the intro is too long, or I skip it, or I don't like the beatbox, or we're like, well, that's fine, we're not going to change it.
Yeah, and that's great. I love like owning it. I think that's something that people need to do more of is owning their personality and being authentic to who they are, and it makes it way easier because now you don't have to worry about scripting or following it. Like just flip the mic. Like even just us getting on here, like we talked for 2 minutes. Like, hey, here's some topics we're gonna go, and like let's just riff.
That's it, man. And that's how we roll. Like that's how Matt and I, any presentation, we usually we're better at bullet points rather than scripting anything.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of Matt, I think you guys are one of the rare podcasts that has 2 hosts, right? So what's that like? What's that like having a partner, in terms of the business, like how you guys operate from the business side, and how do you like it having, a co-host?
Yeah, it's the only thing I know, in terms of a podcast. So I guess that's one thing, but having him as a co-host has helped tremendously. And that's like our Hustle and Flowchart name is all play on words. So I'm more the hustle of the business. He's more of the flowchart. So the more the analyst kind of guy, where I'm more of the, hey, conversational networker, kind of make deals happen kind of guy. So I feel like that also extends into the interview where we can ask different kind of questions.
Absolutely,
we know each other's brains so well. I mean, obviously we have a history of like 15 years, so we had that coming into it. But I know he's usually going to like ask a very specific question in the podcast, and I will as well, but I'm more of the type that will further the conversation. I'll try to go a little deeper. And, Matt typically has like an angle that he wants to go down. He's like specifically, sometimes change a topic, but it's cool. It's like a good, I'd say, balance. So we're kind of hitting on all marks.
Yeah. So what recommendations would you have for someone who wanted to start a podcast and is looking for a co-host? Oh, and I think another cool thing about it is, sorry to cut you off before I give you a chance to answer.
You're good.
But a cool thing is there's a built-in accountability there too. Right. And like you guys are obviously rolling now and you have an audience and you have a good business behind it. But when you were getting started, you said, one of the hard things is getting started. And I think a big thing people have a problem with is being consistent. And when it's just yourself who has to do it, you can push it off. But when you have a partner, I think holds you accountable to higher quality and being consistent. So
100%, man. That's both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what recommendations would you have for someone who was starting a podcast and maybe looking to find a co-host or find someone in their own network who's a co-host?
Yeah, I would say even prior to maybe even considering that is see like are you the type that needs a co-host? Some people don't. But a lot of folks kind of feel like they want that second person, at least like it doesn't even need to be a like I would say Matt and I are 50-50 pretty much on the mic. Sometimes you'll hear like a theme that's more mindset-y or self-improvement. That'll be like me taking probably more of it, where he goes very tactical. He loves both, and we both do. But he's got more of that, tactical brain, so he can ask those kind of questions more. So I would say it depends on the type of category or like the theme of the show that you're going after. Like what's the intention behind the whole thing? But in terms of working with people, figure out someone that you already have some rapport with would probably be a good place to start. A business partner's the most no-brainer out there, but someone that at least talks your language, you kind of already have like a flow with them in conversation, and it doesn't feel like it's super rigid because you don't want that rigidity on the audio where it's like start, stop. It's like you want a flow in the conversation because everyone's going to feel the energy of it. Another thing that Matt and I did that this was last year or the year before, we did these personality tests and really understood like how are the ways that Matt's going to talk and like perceive. It's basically all these different personality points that we can understand him, he can understand me. I know what to say that's not going to like push his buttons. He'll know,
or what will push his buttons.
Exactly. I have the key. But so it's weird, but like we waited, well over 10 years to take these assessments for ourselves. But after doing that, it really shined a light on the things that we should be thinking about, obviously working on as well, because we have different focuses there.
Yeah. Was there a specific test that you took, or out of the ones that you did take, one that you liked more?
We took a lot. So we took the Kolbe, is a good one, Kolbe. That's I think it's like $50, totally worth it. Yeah. We actually hire people based off of the Kolbe as well, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That worked well. So we hired our ops manager. Yeah. And the DISC assessment, DISC, is a free one. So I would say I would start there. Yeah. It's a good one.
Cool. That's brings up another good topic. So you hired your operations manager. What does the business look like outside of the two of you guys who are the face of the videos and podcasts that you do?
So the business itself is, I would say it all, it's around the podcast and all that, but it has these like splinters of like, okay, we're gonna have this email list. So we have systems around there. We have the newsletter. We have that second podcast I told you about.
Yeah, and which is great. So that's
like it's all repurposed, and that's actually someone else on our team from Gen M originally, nice. Who we hired full time now, who runs that for us.
That's a great testimonial.
So, yeah, man. I mean, he literally takes over. He owns everything in the podcast. So after we record, we send it in Dropbox, and so in terms of people, we have the ops manager who kind of holds down the ship on all these folks. Jacob, who edits the podcast and assembles all these things, repurposes our content. And then we have note takers as well that are helping us basically take notes on every episode and write in the show notes. And essentially all that stuff is happening outside of our, after we pass the file over to them.
Right.
They just kind of handle it. And Matt and I day to day is really into the marketing side. Matt does a lot of paid ads and SEO stuff and written content. I do a lot of video content, a lot of these things. And I mean, there's all sorts of different things we're exploring. We're always just learning, writing more content, or create more content in affiliate marketing and blowing up the podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you guys really put out like super insightful stuff, very practical stuff. Most of your guests come on like ready to just like educate the hell out of people, which is awesome. But with that, so you do have a wide range of topics. Like I consider Hustle and Flowcharts to be a business podcast, but like the episode that came out today is biohacking, right? So and then there's been stuff about a CrossFit business and real estate. So how do you guys kind of figure out what topics, how to keep the topics relevant enough for the audience to still be interested and find valuable versus exploring new ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. We struggled with that starting off. So we started very marketing and businessy focused and picked up steam and it was great. But then we realized, there's actually bigger strategies and things that will apply to business if we inject those every now and then. So it's it's still like we see it as a business, a marketing show, but at the same time we see it like underneath is really a self-improvement type show. So it's just masking as a businessy thing. Because like biohacking, we're always going to relate how to, like it's weird things like taking iodine supplements twice a day. I do that now, but it's proven to increase your IQ and your brain function. So it's like, you think that's going to help your business and being productive? So, or even we talked about conferences and like, making sure that, this is conference season right now. A lot of people travel. So it's like actually the episode that came out today is chatting about these strategies you can use so you're not going to feel like hell when you go and travel and stay up late, party, and, like you're going to have all the ammunition to do your best when you go out there. So
I'll definitely be downloading the notes for that one. And so how did you guys come up with that idea of the kind of expiring notes to download? And for anybody who hasn't listened to the show yet, the way it works is every episode they have someone on their team take notes, and then you can go and visit the site, and on that post, you can sign up to get access to those notes, which are like, I mean, they're great. They're full on notes and practical information you can apply right away. But they expire after, I forget, 2 weeks or something along those lines. So how'd you come up with that idea, and how's it working?
Yeah, that's so we came up with the idea because we wanted to get really customized, like as a lead gen for the episode that someone just listened to. We started off before the notes. It was customizing, like retargeting and affiliate campaigns and other content around the topic they listened to.
Yeah.
But that was kind of broad, and that comes later anyway. But that's that's just down the pipe more. Yeah. So we're like, okay, how do we save time for people that don't want to listen to an hour? Or at the same time, if they do, maybe they want to just listen and drive or walk, but not actually take notes and the takeaways from it all. Yeah. So that's where, and then we already had the newsletter from the year prior to. We actually put it on hiatus. It was completely different at the time. It wasn't notes. Yeah. It was all original content. Right. But we're like, you know what? We want to bring physical mail back into this thing because we love the whole send it in the mail, get them offline kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the missing link was really this opt-in, these notes in the middle. Yeah. And so, as you said, someone opts in for the notes, and we're like, well, why don't we just, the content created in the notes actually can become the newsletter. And if it's so cheap, $15 a month, we're selling it on time savings and like, hey, we don't want you to miss any little detail.
Yeah.
That these guests are, like you said, they come to educate, and holy crap, they're like, here's my 20-step process for making a Facebook ad that, you can convert like crazy for $1 a day. I'm like, oh, well, that's in the notes. You can listen to it, but do you really want to write down every little detail? So,
right. Yeah, I mean, they really are like, it's a playbook of action, and something that can immediately get given to your team. I download the notes. I think I'm sure one of the Kurt Molly episodes was ridiculous, and I signed up and downloaded it, and I sent it over to my team and said, guys, check this out, read it, like put it into our processes. So it's super practical. But through the years, like being the kind of guys that love testing and experimenting, like what are some of your current favorite kind of tips, tricks, and hacks that you're using? And maybe what's one or two tricks that you tried over the years that just you thought was going to be awesome and totally flopped?
Yeah. So right now we're testing a lot on Twitter ads. Matt's doing a lot on there, and we're still honing it in, but definitely there's a lot of inexpensive traffic on there.
Yeah.
And
do you know the pricing like on Twitter ads versus like the Facebook stuff?
I don't know a perfect comparison right now. Right. It's still early days, but that's where we're putting a lot of attention. We'll just say it's cheaper than Facebook from what we've found so far, considerably. All right, that's good to know. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And you can go a lot wider too, which is really cool, and test. So we're doing that. We do a lot of stuff, like we go on Quora. So that's an option where you can actually you don't need to pay any money, but you just answer people's questions. And that's a way we grow our podcast and sell affiliate offers on there just by answering questions.
Yeah.
Quora is amazing. We started we kind of restarted and rebranded our Facebook group and have been really trying to connect that with our podcast. And that whole thing comes back to like, we just want to hang out with our friends, but we also want to have more of a dialogue back and forth. So now we can use that Facebook group to, engage with everyone, invite our guests on there as well, so they can interact with our audience and, provide more content, put offers in there as well over time. It's like another email list in a way.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, the idea of retargeting and omnipresence, and I've been through, I don't know do you still sell the perpetual audience?
Yeah, we do.
Course?
Yeah.
And
so people love it still.
Yeah, it's awesome. I bought it like a year ago or something like that, and I think it's mentioned in there, but it's mentioned in a bunch of places. But retargeting in Facebook, Instagram, audience network that reaches everything, like Facebook audience network and Google audience network, you're hitting like 90% of the internet, right? And the idea is when you do that, now people see you in all these different places, and because they're seeing you in different places, it creates a stronger bond than if they're just seeing you in the inbox. And then tying in the offline where they're getting physical mail from you, like that just like 10x's that relationship feeling, right? So I love that you guys are putting in, you know, the Quora, the Twitter ads, offline, online, Facebook groups, like it really is. But then that sounds like a whole lot of work to do, right? So like, what are some tools and resources that you guys use to kind of be more efficient in doing all that?
Yeah, so having an ops manager helps and other people on the team, but it's definitely not required, I would say. Yeah. So what we've been using now lately is a big marketing calendar that's very simple, actually. And I think Matt just posted this to our Facebook group today. Just seeing if people want it. It's literally just a Drive Google Sheet. And it just shows our whole month. And I know people have talked about monthly calendars, but that thing will actually look out weeks and weeks prior and figure out, okay, what are the promos happening? What are the Facebook group posts that we should be doing each day, or every other day or so?
Yeah.
What emails are being sent out? So really, it's an overview level. So it's not going to show every little thing we're doing, but it gives us the vision of being consistent and what's actually going to move our KPIs up, which is, our KPIs are usually around newsletter subscriber growth, email growth, and traffic, because we know that's all going to turn into money at the end of the day and blowing everything up we're doing. So I would say like that, having like a good overview and then reviewing that with whoever you're working with. And for us, it's the whole team, and Matt and I will hop on calls to like get into more details.
Yeah.
But like we're both living in that sheet and making sure we're always ticking the boxes, we're getting ahead of it. And then, our personal to-dos are focused enough where they're driving those up too.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you guys have a remote team?
Yeah, we do.
And Slack and Google Drive are how you keep all that organized?
Slack is huge. Yeah, that's where we communicate with everyone. Everyone is mainly in the States, US. And I think we have one VA in the Philippines helping us with some guest research on the podcast, which is a cool little hack too. If you're looking for some help to at least get the ball moving, hire someone, in the Philippines or wherever to do some research for you.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so everyone's a Drive, using Google Sheets, and a little bit of Notion as well.
That's becoming more and more popular.
It is, yeah. The thing there we noticed is that it was becoming too complicated too. So I think I would urge you to try to simplify as much as possible, and that's why we went to Drive. I keep calling it Drive, Google, whatever they're calling it now. Yeah, and the Sheets. I mean, you can run everything through there, and you don't have to pay anything, or you pay a low fee as a business.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned the guest thing, and you have I guess 2 a week, right? The short one and the long one. So you have a guest essentially every week, but you also have therapy sessions, which is no guest. And I think that's really cool too, especially because there's 2 of you where, you kind of take some time. So how did you guys end up starting those, guestless episodes? And can you talk about what they are and how they've been helping with the audience?
For sure. That's a great question, because we love to, the reason we started them first is because people wanted to hear more of us. Yeah. And that's why I think the intros, going back to that, that's why we have those in there, because it's literally feedback we received and, from our most loyal folks. And I think over time, that's how our personality gets ingrained into the show. So that's what people wanted to hear more of. So we're like, well, why don't we do, I think we do is it 2 per month? Therapy sessions. Yeah. It's either 1 or 2. I should know that. But doesn't really matter either way. We're getting out there at least on a monthly basis. There's a show there that's completely dedicated to, it's like the good, the bad, and the ugly that Matt and I are going through in business and life. I mean, I've talked about some crazy stuff in my personal life, and then also, we've talked about the big failures and shifts in our business as well, and how we're going to rebuild things. And sometimes the download numbers aren't the biggest on those episodes, but 100% they're the ones where we get the most feedback and people going like, oh my God, this thing helped me clarify so much, or I'm going through the same issues. Thanks for talking. It's really where we get vulnerable. And I mean, we have no problem just putting anything out there
Yeah.
and quickly forgetting that there's like 50,000 downloads a month or whatever it is right now. Like, oh, we're actually talking to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Were you guys always like that, comfortable putting out, like, just firing up the mic and recording, or how did you come to be so comfortable in that?
It took time, man. It took us like it took us about a year and a half in, I think, is when we started to like realize, oh, we're writing out too many pre-questions, we're trying to be like too prepped.
Yeah.
This even goes back to customer or guest research, researching your guests. You obviously want to know about them, but at the same time, like, we don't want to know too much about them, because it's kind of like if you're at a conference or just sitting down with someone for coffee, it's like, you're not going to totally like know your research and all the different things they've done in their life or read their, I mean, we try to read their books all the time.
Sure.
But yeah, man, like, so I think where we always strive is like have a general idea of a knowledge of how to drive the conversation and relate to either the guest, or like if it's Matt and I, we're relating to some shared experience that we can then, publish with everyone else out there so they can check it out.
Yeah. I'm curious I'm kind of on your side. I like the high level bullet points, like just conversation around stuff and being curious. And I think over researching a guest almost makes it harder, because then it's like, well, I don't know that I would feel like asking the same questions when you know the answer. But then I've also heard professional interviewers say, like, you should never ask a question you don't know the answer to, which sounds ridiculous to me, because I think the whole idea, at least for the kind of shows that I like to listen to and be a part of, is exploring these ideas and being curious and engaged around it. And I've always found that to be a interesting position on, like, interviewing. And I think maybe that comes from like the old like news anchor type interview versus more modern, like, fun conversation, kind of BS and batting things around.
And that's where we get the inspiration from, like, I think one of your questions you're going to ask me, and I'll just say it now, is
jump in.
Like, one of my favorite podcasts is Joe Rogan's podcast, and Matt and I, that and Dax Shepard, I would say his Experts on Experts, and the other one he has, Armchair Expert. They're both amazing. Yeah, and if you think about both of those, they're genuinely curious people, and it's almost like a free-flowing conversation.
Right.
And it just feels like you're chatting with a friend. So it's like, why not bring that to the podcast? And, we're not the types that we want to grill people anyway. We just want to have fun and get paid for, basically chatting with our buddies. Like, that's all we're doing.
Well, that's a good question too. So how many, because it does seem like you guys are really actually friends with a lot of the guests that you have on the show. Like,
we are
most of the people primarily, like, you're just hitting up your network of friends and bringing on, or do you ever do outreach to get new guests, or how does your guest stuff work?
Yeah, this is like probably the most common question we get, because they look at our, like, the Rolodex of people, and there's like, holy crap, like, how did you get Dave Asprey on there? Or like, all these different folks, that James Altucher and da-da-da.
Yeah.
It started off with, our own personal network, which over the years, 10 years, we built up a pretty good network in this space.
Yeah.
Just from previous businesses, because we were always affiliates. I used to do a lot of service stuff and helped people launch their products online with big product launch videos. And, like, we've always been in the crew of like the Frank Kerns, the Mike Vilsames, and all that.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just ask your buddies, like, hey, who else would you recommend to hop on the show after we wrap up? And but then above that, we have this Dream 100 strategy that I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
Get into it though. It's great.
It is, yeah. This one is actually something everyone can use. And this has given us, I gotta give him credit, Roland Frazier, one of the owners of Digital Marketer. He's in a mastermind with us, and he basically told us to do this for him to introduce a ton of people. So he literally, like, he's like, make me a list of 100 names that you want on your podcast. And I'm like, okay. So that day, I made a list, and literally the next day he introduced like 25 people to us. I was like, holy crap. I can't, like, all right, well, there goes my plans for the day. So, and they're people like, it's like all big name folks. And, but that came through our network. And what I started thinking is like, okay, well, I could take this Google sheet, is what I made and shared with Roland. Well, all we did is we made that our Dream 100. So all these names on the list there are basically a combo of people that are like 1 degree from us, like from our network, or there's some moonshots like Elon Musk, or Mars shots. I don't know if you want to say that, but and ironically, one of the people that's a customer of ours in our podcast training says like, "Hey, my wife's friend works with Elon."
Wow.
I mean, it's probably still a very long shot, but he's like, "Hey, give me a pitch so I can actually." I was like, "Shit, like, that's cool."
Yeah.
So yeah, that Dream 100. What if people wanted to? So what it is basically a Google sheet that I link to my email signature. And because I use Gmail as well, Drive in the business to send all my emails, and it's a Google sheet. And if you're a Google user as well, it'll basically show up as an attachment to the initial email you send in an email chain. And with that on there, it just looks like like I attached a spreadsheet to the email, but it's really just pulling because it's the Google URL in the signature. So it's just a curiosity thing. I don't actually say, like, I think in the email I say, check out our Dream 100. Do you know anyone? And it's question mark, And that's super curiosity cool. enough for click, and then they see that list, and literally people just introduce people to us like randomly. We don't even have to ask at this point.
Yeah, just on autopilot. That's the best way to do it. Something I've been kind of curious about. We were going to do this. I help run a festival out here called the Propelify Innovation Festival, and we have Altucher was one of our speakers this year. We've had Ariana Huffington, Gary Vee, Dave Melsner. We have 80 speakers throughout the day. It's pretty crazy. But last year, one of the ideas we were playing with and just didn't have the time to get done was, have you ever heard of Thunderclap?
I know. What is that?
So I don't know if it's still around, but it was this thing where you could get like all your fans to sign up for, I think it was Twitter, some kind of social share, and then you pre-write the message so they log in and agree to like have it share from their account, and then all at you say like Friday at 1 p.m. like all these people are going to share it. And so I was thinking like Elon Musk was probably on our list too, right? And so it was like, what if we had all of our subscribers sign up for this and tweet at the same time and blast Elon Musk like, hey, we want to see Elon at the Propelify Innovation Festival, and like see if that could garner some kind of response.
I get that. So, that's pretty cool. I like that. That doesn't exist anymore though, that app?
I don't know if it does. It was about a year ago when we were looking at it as an option. I definitely am going to make a note to myself to revisit though, because I think it would be pretty cool to test that out. And like, imagine if he did or maybe someone lower than Elon, but like, I think it would be pretty cool. And then the fans, like how awesome it would feel for them to be like, we helped recruit him to the festival.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I love it. Cool. I've never thought of that angle, but I mean, hey, it's social proof. You have all these people reaching out.
Yeah. And everyone, and Elon Musk is like, what the hell is the Propelify Innovation Festival? So
guess I gotta go because everyone's telling me.
Exactly. So, all right, man, you've been just dropping a ton of knowledge on podcasting as a business. I love it. Is there anything that people who want to turn their podcast into a business, anything real like key advice that you would want to make sure that they knew to get off on the right foot or take things to the next level?
Yeah, so we polled a bunch of podcasters we have on our list. We pulled about 1,000 of them, and the big thing that we've realized is, first, no one's really thinking about it with like a marketing mindset. Yeah. So if you have a show, it's content. It's just like a blog or something, or a video, YouTube video. So figure out a couple of ways to grow your audience, and there's so many out there. You can kind of apply digital marketing to this. Yeah. And then on the other side is making money with your show. And think of it as like, you don't have to make it directly on the show. It could be indirect. So in the follow-ups of an email or a Facebook group. Yeah. And 85% of people from that 1,000 poll, that survey we did, 85% make $0 from their show. Wow. Which we're like, no, why do you do that? Like, why are you?
So I mean, it's just a hobby, really,
Yeah, and that's how people see it, which is fine. Yeah, if it's a hobby and you're doing it for passion.
If you do it intentionally as a hobby, that's okay, right? But if you start doing it because you're like, oh, all these businesses have podcasts, I'm going to start a podcast, and then $0, that's a problem.
Yeah. It's totally a problem. So that's why our previous shows are one of the reasons why we stopped, because we didn't see the connection of ROI. And you're never going to see a perfect like path either.
Right. Yeah.
But as you said, like a lot of brands, the easiest way to make money with your show is connect it to an offer that you already have, or it could be consulting. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I need to do sponsorship revenue or do this crazy elaborate funnel. Like literally you can just say, hey, we got a free, a call that a discovery call. Go to this link. And then sure enough, you're probably going to get your most loyal people reaching out, and they'll probably buy your stuff because they're getting to know you already from the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a couple of the big things, one of the mistakes I see a lot of podcasters make, I'm curious if you've gotten feedback or insights into this with your polls, is I see a lot of people creating podcasts around that, like mistakenly talking to their peers instead of their potential customers, right? So for instance, if it's an accountant starting a podcast where he's talking about things that other accountants are interested in and he's interviewing other accountants, as opposed to you should be talking about things business owners are interested in so that you attract a business owner audience. I think that's one of the big things. And you mentioned, people put out the content but not promote it, right? Like you have to market it and then turn it into something. And I think, my main thing with this show and what you guys do is create, it takes an hour to do the show, and now the team can split this off and it becomes blog posts, emails, social posts, ads, and you guys are even turning the content into the newsletters that you charge for. And I think that's super smart for people to do. And I think there is real opportunity, for people to use podcasting as a hub, especially video podcasting, as a hub for their business, instead of it being like a cool hobby that they got to play around with and last for 2 months or whatever.
Exactly, man. Like you nailed it. And just, it's the intention of the podcast. That's why I always ask, like, what's the goal of this thing? Okay, is it a hobby? Well, sweet. Right. Then maybe money is not the issue, but maybe you want to grow an audience. Well, make that your focus, Yeah.
Well, and speaking of which, the purpose of this podcast is to promote Zeotag and get people to sign up for free accounts. So if you are publishing podcasts or videos, zeotag.com, get a free account there. That would be awesome.
There you go.
Joe, one last question before I let you go and tell us where we can find you. Question you ask everybody and I love is, what book or resource have you been recommending a lot lately to people?
Yeah, so this one is a newer one, and we in this shift of last year, we realized we were doing too much, and I had a lot of family things happen. Father died, had a baby 30 days later. It was crazy. So it's like a mental screwball. And the business was getting great opportunities, but too many opportunities. There's a lack of focus. So I quickly realized, oh shit, I'm not paying attention to myself. So this is actually an episode coming out in a week, but we had a guy named Kamal Ravikant on the show, and his brother's actually Naval Ravikant, who's this billionaire. They both invested in Uber and massive companies in Silicon Valley. He just released a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And it's not a business book. Yeah, most people do, man. Yeah. And usually the more you're into business and driving as an entrepreneur, the less you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, man, I noticed I was being really hard on myself, in terms of just getting stuff done or following through on things that I thought I should be doing or showing up in. So it's actually like a practical, there's narrative parts of it, but there's practical instructions on meditations and ways to kind of flip that mind in the right direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some tips you have for the entrepreneurs out there who are shiny object? Because there is really a crazy abundance of opportunity when you're paying attention to it, right? So, how do you kind of reel it in to get refocused on the things that do matter and make a difference?
Yeah, I'd say the big thing, and this is what we went through, is figure out what we actually want out of life. I know that sounds big, but the business is going to serve your life. It should be there to serve your life first as a business owner. I mean, if you didn't want to have all the stresses or management of payroll and all the overhead and all that stuff, then you would probably just have a job.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're served first as a business owner. So with that, like Matt and I decided the business models that we were thinking about getting in towards the end of 2019 would have taken us way off that path. We would have had to travel more. We would have had to do all this agency work that we didn't really want to do. It just wasn't us.
Yeah.
And it's great for some people. I did it for a little bit, but not to the scale that we would have needed to.
Yeah.
So we're like, no, we want to do affiliate marketing because we're great at chatting like this. We're great at coming up with content and then sharing it everywhere.
Yeah.
And people say they like it from us. Cool. So figure out like what lights you up as a whole, but also like, because you're going to be doing this a lot with business. So, and then with that, freaking cut everything off as much as you can. Like it's all about focus and taking consistent action. And it's so simple to be, but like consistency, that's how the podcast has lasted now for over 3 years. That marketing calendar I talked about, that's keeping us consistent. And then checking in, always like checking in on if your metrics are going the right direction helps kind of motivate you with the consistency as well.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So all right, where can everybody find you? You got so much great stuff going on, your own training stuff I highly recommend in all the communities. So where's the best place for people to find out more about you?
So I didn't mention about it a lot, but we have that traffic book. We have this, it's something like, it's well over 100 pages. We actually just expanded it for this year.
Oh, I got to download the new one then.
You should, actually. There's a lot more in there now.
Yeah.
So basically it's how we run traffic, not only for the podcast, but to video content, written content, the retargeting stuff you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we have a ton of strategies from people who've chatted about, paid, organic, all that traffic on the podcast. That's now all in the book.
Awesome.
So you could actually see some forms of the notes now that we were talking about in this book. If you go to hustleandflowchart.com/Zeotech.
Awesome.
So that you can link that up, and that's going to be all ready for you there.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Thanks, man, so much. I really appreciate you coming on. So much great stuff. And I'm really also excited to get the word out for all the stuff you're doing, because you guys are doing great work for the podcast community. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.